international media consensus following the recent Beijing summit between President Xi Jinping and his US counterpart Donald Trump was predictable, grand on optics, short on substance. Yet to dismiss it on those grounds alone is to miss the deeper story. The summit marked a turning point in how Washington and Beijing manage their rivalry, particularly over Taiwan. To understand where this relationship is going, a brief historical detour is in order. Back in April 2001, just months into his presidency, George W. Bush departed from the long-held script of strategic ambiguity by declaring in a television interview that the US would do whatever it took to help Taiwan defend itself. It was an unusually blunt claim, delivered amid the Hainan spy plane crisis that had already strained ties. At the time, early Bush foreign policy explicitly framed China as a strategic competitor, heralding what many expected to be years of bitter confrontational ties. That script was torn up just 5 months later by the 9/11 terror attacks. As counterterrorism became the overriding priority, Washington began emphasizing pragmatic cooperation with Beijing, particularly on fighting terror, managing North Korea, and keeping a lid on Taiwan. In this climate, Washington and Beijing worked together to restrain Taiwan's independence-leaning leader Chen Shui-bian. Emboldened by Bush's earlier support, Chen pushed identity politics and a 2004 referendum on Beijing's missiles. After private warnings failed, Bush publicly rebuked Chen in December 2003 alongside Premier Wen Jiabao, declaring that the US opposed any unilateral decision by either China or Taiwan to change the status quo. Behind closed doors, Bush reportedly used much harsher language, labeling Chen a troublemaker. This shift illustrated how US-China cooperation can reshape Taiwan's political dynamics and how quickly Washington's priorities can change. It ultimately contributed to the Kuomintang KMT reclaiming the presidency under Ma Ying-jeou in 2008. Fast forward to today, and the global balance of power is fundamentally transformed. China is now the world's second largest economy, backed by exponential growth in its military capability. After more than a decade of intense, multi-front confrontation with Washington spanning trade, tech, and geopolitics, China has emerged as a true near peer, a reality Trump himself has acknowledged by repeatedly invoking the concept of the G2. Furthermore, American foreign policy under Trump has undergone its own massive recalibration, refocusing inward and toward its own backyard in the Western Hemisphere. In many ways, the Beijing summit signaled the formal arrival of a new normal, a bilateral paradigm that recognizes China as a peer on the world stage, where both nations simultaneously compete and cooperate on an equal footing, and where Taiwan remains the most important test case. In this new reality, Trump is certainly no George W. Bush, and his transactional, highly skeptical view of Taiwan is well documented. He famously compared Taiwan to the tip of a Sharpie next to the desk of mainland China, publicly accused the island of stealing America's semiconductor business, and argued that Taipei should pay for its own defense like an insurance policy. At the recent Beijing summit, Trump openly disclosed that he discussed US arms sales to Taiwan in great detail, with Xi a move that fundamentally upends Ronald Reagan's 1982 pledge to Taipei that Washington would not consult Beijing on such sales. Trump went even further, describing the weapons pipeline as a very good bargaining chip and noting that he was holding current sales in abeyance because it depends on China. Much has been made of Trump's cabinet of China hawks, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, with cynics quipping that Trump might turn out to be the most China-friendly figure in his own administration. But even the administration's most vocal hawks are adjusting to the new script. A telling indicator of this shift can be found by comparing Hegseth's speeches at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore over the last 2 years. Last year, Hegseth delivered a fiery adversarial address focused squarely on the China threat, warning that Beijing was actively preparing for an imminent invasion of Taiwan by 2027 and urging Asian allies to unite against Chinese aggression. This year, the tone was night and day. In his entire prepared speech, Hegseth did not mention Taiwan a single time. While he still noted rifle alarm regarding China's historic military buildup, his approach reflected a new Pentagon mantra for regional stability: strong, quiet, but clear. This softened public line coincides with Washington and Beijing actively reopening critical military-to-military communications channels. As the superpowers recalibrate, cross-strait politics are also shifting. In April, President Xi met with KMT chair Chen Li-wun in Beijing, the first meeting between the heads of the Communist Party and the KMT in a decade. Both sides used the meeting to re-anchor themselves to the 1992 consensus and voice opposition to Taiwan independence. Following up on this momentum, Chen embarked on a 2-week tour of the United States on June 1, aimed at reassuring American officials, academics, and diaspora communities that the KMT remains a responsible, stabilizing force for peace. Most notably, Chen expressed a willingness to meet with President Trump, a proposition that raised many eyebrows. Crucially, Beijing's foreign ministry has kept its public commentary on her US trip notably muted. This quietude underscores an unspoken reality. Beijing still views Washington's influence as indispensable for cross-strait stability. Cynics may argue her high-profile outreach to Beijing may inadvertently strengthen the Democratic Progressive Party and its leader, William Lai Ching-te, ahead of the local elections this November and the 2028 presidential race. But history shows that when Washington and Beijing align, Taiwan's political dynamics can change dramatically. This new phase is not without risks. If Beijing interprets reduced American commitment as a green light for greater pressure on Taiwan, it could trigger dangerous miscalculations. Equally, powerful China hawks in Congress and within parts of the Trump administration itself could push back hard against any perceived softening, limiting Trump's room for maneuver. This is the prism through which the Beijing summit should be understood. It was not about flashy announcements, but about laying the groundwork for a new phase in US-China relations. The real test lies not in whether Xi and Trump meet several more times this year, but whether Washington and Beijing can work together for a durable de-escalation of tensions across the Taiwan Strait. The Bush-era saga reminds us that such cooperation, however unlikely, can still reshape outcomes.